Hello and welcome to the Curator's Salon podcast. I'm Geeta Joshi, and today my guest is Victoria Mann from AKAA Art Fair. AKAA stands for also known as Africa. Welcome, Victoria.
Thank you.
I'm excited to talk to you. Can you share some more about your background and how the fair came about?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me with you today. So I actually have an art history background. I studied in the States first and started out my career in institutions, worked in the education department for the Metropolitan Museum in New York. And in 2010, I returned to France after a long period of time in the States and wanted to specialize in contemporary African art at a time where that was not really a possibility, I guess, and was very strongly oriented towards traditional African art, which has a very strong market in France. So when I finished my master's, I had decided that I would one day want to open my own either gallery or artist agency or some kind of market structure that would defend contemporary African arts. And I started working for Pace Gallery out of London and Paris, and worked a lot on fairs, the big ones. And that was when the idea came to actually create a platform that was both um, geared towards the market, but also cultural to showcase these talents. And I figured that if I created a platform that, got everybody together for a set time of the year, it would have maybe a larger impact. So yeah, that's how I came to create the fair.
Amazing. And yeah, that totally makes sense. The idea of a gallery, there's only so many artists you can support. But of course, like with a fair, you're inviting the dealers, the galleries, and obviously, that ripple effect of the artists that they support. What would you say is the mission statement for the fair, and has that even evolved?
So when I started, and completely honestly, I had no idea what I was getting into. When I started, a lot of people around me said that the first thing I had to do was create a business plan and kind of figure out how the economics of it were going to function. But I didn't really know how to do that back in the day. I knew how to write, though. I had studied art history my entire life, student life, and so that's exactly what I did. And the vision really was the starting point of this whole event. And my the way I wanted to create this platform was to look at contemporary African art and take out the geography from the equation. And that can sound like a paradox, and it was actually tricky to explain 10 years back. But the idea was to look at each and every artist, and what was interesting to me was the link that they claimed in their work, in their practice to the African continent, rather than where they came from. The last thing I wanted was to put an etiquette on an artist that said Africa. And I didn't want to I didn't want to put artists in boxes. I didn't want to limit it by borders, and so that's really how I came about it. And it for me, the name of the fair says it all. also known as Africa, is kind of an open-ended question to each and every artist that is presented in the fair to kind of tell us about their Africa, their representation of Africa, what has inspired them. And it can be, of course, it can be linked to geography and it can be linked to identity and culture. But it can also be linked to a whole other panel of subjects like history and heritage and travel and collaboration and residency, encounter. And all of the sudden, you're not talking about something African per se, but you're talking about an international group of artists that all relate to a certain area on our earth. And so that's how we came about the fair.
Amazing. And how has the fair evolved over the years? Because I know it's not only artists who are based in Africa that exhibit there or galleries only from Africa. It is, across the globe, right, with African representation.
Exactly. And I have to say that more and more we're getting these open-ended conversations at the forefront. So in the first years, even though the message has always been the same, we had a majority of African artists, Africa-based artists, or immediate diaspora artists in the fair. This also came from a real need on the French art market to discover these artists. The African art scenes have always existed, but the market 10 years back was emergent. And I don't think that is the case today anymore. We're not in an emergent market. We're in a market that's stabilizing and it's strengthening. And over the past few editions, we've really been able to open up and look at all of these different art scenes in the world that kind of link back, especially through themes like history and heritage. I think that's a very strong one. Also social impact, economical impact, climate impact, all these different themes that a lot of artists tackle and share. And so we'll have more and more presence of artists and their galleries that are from Latin America, the US, Middle East, and the Caribbean, particularly this year, and that makes for a really strong panel of artists.
Well, I am definitely looking forward to visiting this October. Do you see any issues that are specific to the contemporary art scene? Because from the way I've been looking at it, it's like I follow a number of Ghanaian artists online, or Ethiopian artists, for example, Nigerian artists. And, there's definitely like a visual connection sometimes because my preference is painting at the moment. But in terms of like, I don't know, issues that they face, would you say there are any specific ones that perhaps, yeah, that, they would be encountering?
Well, I think, it all comes back to that notion of geography and kind of being cornered into where you're from rather than what you do. And I think that's very true for Africa, because sometimes we talk about contemporary African art. And what does that mean? I mean, Africa is a continent, has 54 countries, 54 cultures, 54 histories, a lot more inspirations, and so there's that. And then each artist is an individual that creates inspired by the world that surrounds him or her. And I think that's really what makes contemporary art such a different movement than all of the movements that we've had before. It's this capacity to be unique. We're no longer looking at art as in schools of arts or movements, or if you're not doing the same thing, then you're not a good artist. Today, It's the capacity to really have your own voice, your own identity that, you know, takes you out of the lot and has you shine. And I think that's important to remember when we're talking about artists from Africa or the diaspora, is that you know, each one of them has a voice. And I think that the challenge is to make that voice heard in their own individual way, without without forsaking where they're from and what they're doing, and without having that tag that labels them from Africa. And it's interesting because when we talk about contemporary artists from Europe or from the States, we don't necessarily talk about American contemporary art or European contemporary art, or so, but it's something that we do in a more readily from the other parts of the world. And so I think that what's interesting, and the work that we're trying to do over the years, is to shift that perception of the contemporary art map. What if the center of contemporary art was no longer Europe and America? What if it was Africa? And what if it was Latin America, or what if it was, you know, Southeast Asia? And then we're looking at all of these artists and not labeling them from a geographical perspective, all the while allowing them those geographical ties.
Yeah, I so agree with that. And I love the way you explain that. So thank you for that. For this year's fair, what can we expect? Is there anything new and different?
So that's the greatest challenge of a fair, is how to be new and different every year. One of the most important parts of our fair that has been so since the very first edition is that we always welcome one artist for a major installation in the center of the fair. It's, as we say in French, a marque de fabrique for the fair. And we really, in selecting that artist, we always look at several criteria. We always try to bring different media as a central installation. So we've had artists that focus on textile work as a center installation. We've had artists focus a little bit more on conceptual and mixed media work. We've had artists focus on sculpture. We've had artists focus on painting. This year, we are welcoming an artist who focuses on sculpture, and who is from Cameroon, but lives and works in France, and whose work is all about stimulating visual memory in via objects of everyday that he recuperates, and confronting it to our consumption and ecological reality. So it's about both memory, it's about childhood, it's about coming of age, but it's also about waste, and it's about what we do with what we consume on a very large scale. And his
Amazing.
name is Malam, important. And it's very exciting because he is producing the sculpture for the fair. So it will be shown for the very first time at the fair.
Oh,
And
that's fantastic. So it's an
will be
unseen piece.
about between 5 and 7 meters high.
And that is going to be inside the fair or on the outside space?
Inside the fair. It's always inside the fair in the main hall. It's the first thing you see when you come into the fair. Another couple of things I want to mention for this year is always in this idea of expanding to other territories, and to look at these links to the African continent. We're doing a bit of a focus on the Caribbean art scenes this year with three different galleries and many artists that are coming from Guadeloupe, Réunion, Martinique to the fair. Last year we had a big focus on African American artists and still have, and they're still here. And then the year before, rather a bit bigger focus on African Brazilian and African Cuban artists. And so this year, the Caribbean is central, and we're very excited to have these artists that haven't been seen very much in France at all, or in Paris, should I say. And then the last highlight of this year is we are welcoming a special project that will take place in our VIP lounge, created by a artist collective called Norm. And the idea behind their project is to really showcase queer and Black love and culture. So we'll have very established artists and completely emergent and young artists kind of confronting these works that are not always easy to show in a space that feels safe and tolerant for them to express their work.
Amazing. Wow. Well, I am really looking forward to seeing this edition of the fair. If you're in Paris, the fair takes place 18th to 20th of October. And I am going to add the links to get tickets and images of Malam's work and the fair and everything in the show notes, so you can head over there. Victoria, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
One of the special things about our fair, which is one of my favorite parts, is that a lot of the artists are here. They come, they travel, they're in the fair, and there is such a vibrant energy thanks to their presence, and they're so approachable and accessible. So everybody should take advantage of that.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Victoria, for being my guest on today's podcast.
Thank you.